2 years ago, I was sitting at my kitchen table at 11 p.m., eating cold leftovers straight out of the container. No plans, no company, just me and my phone. And for the first time in 6 years of earning a real salary, I actually looked at my bank account. Not glanced at it, not avoided it. Looked. Credit card balance, $4,127. Savings account, $812. Annual salary, $63,000. 6 years of working, 6 years of promotions and pay rises, and you're doing great. And I had $800 to my name. I sat there for a long time just staring at it. Because here's the thing. I wasn't broke in the obvious way. I paid my rent on time. I wasn't behind on bills. From the outside, my life looked completely fine. Normal even. But one bad thing, one medical bill, one car breakdown, 1 month without work, and I would have completely fallen apart. And the worst part? When I scrolled back through what I'd actually spent that month. Candles, random Target runs, a throw pillow to replace a throw pillow that was perfectly fine, a kitchen gadget still sealed in the box, sitting right next to another kitchen gadget I'd bought 3 months earlier and also never opened. Nothing I bought that month actually made my life better. Not one thing. That hit me harder than the numbers did. I didn't go looking for answers that week. I was honestly too embarrassed to even think about it properly. But a few days later, I came across this random article on, not viral, not trending, about a Japanese woman named Fumiko Chiba, who had spent years studying how ordinary Japanese households manage money across generations. And there was one sentence in that article that I couldn't shake. It said that many of these families had been quietly passing down the same financial habits for generations, grandmothers to mothers, mothers to daughters, not through spreadsheets or apps or investment portfolios, just through daily habits so simple they almost felt insulting. That word quietly stopped me cold, because everything I'd been consuming about money online was the complete opposite of quiet. Make $10,000 a month from your phone. I quit my job in 90 days. Here's how. 5 side hustles that changed my life. Loud, extreme, urgent, and completely useless for someone who just wanted to stop hemorrhaging money every month. Here's what I found when I actually started researching Japanese money culture properly. In America and the UK, wealth is performed. You get a new car, you post it. New flat, you show it off. New wardrobe, you wear it immediately. Spending is the proof that you're doing well. If your life doesn't look expensive, people assume you're struggling. In Japan, it's the opposite. There's a concept called sutsumashi, roughly translated as modest, restrained, controlled, and it carries genuine social respect. The quieter you live, the more admired you are. Displaying wealth is considered almost tasteless. That one cultural difference explains everything. Because when spending becomes a performance, you stop spending on things you actually need and start spending on the image of having things, and that image costs a fortune. I made a decision that week. I wasn't going to chase a higher income. I wasn't going to start a side hustle or move to a cheaper city or cancel every enjoyable thing in my life. I was just going to change the philosophy underneath my spending. Same job, same salary, same flat, different operating system. 12 months later, my savings went from $812 to just over $19,000. Same life, completely different outcome. And it started with something that sounds almost embarrassingly simple. Habit 1, Kakeibo, the notebook that woke my brain up. No app, no software, no subscription, a notebook, a pen, $3. Kakeibo is a Japanese budgeting system created in 1904 by Hani Motoko, Japan's first female journalist. She designed it at a time when women had almost no financial autonomy, as a tool that gave them real control using nothing but awareness. Here's the entire system. At the start of each month, you write down 4 things by hand. How much money is coming in, your fixed expenses, how much you want to save, and how much you have left to spend. Then every single day you write down what you spent, and you sort each purchase into one of 4 categories: needs, wants, culture, books, education, experiences, and unexpected. At the end of the month, 3 questions. How much did I save? What went well? What do I want to change? That's it. That's the whole system. I know how it sounds. I thought the same thing. But here's what I didn't understand before I tried it. Modern budgeting apps make you a passive observer of your own money. You open the app. You see some charts. You feel vaguely guilty. You close it. Nothing changes because nothing was required of you. The app did all the work. Your brain stayed completely asleep, Writing by hand forces your brain to process each purchase consciously. When you sit down at night and physically write DoorDash, $43, want, something different happens. You feel it? It registers. That purchase stops being invisible. Behavioral psychologists call this cognitive friction. And it turns out friction is the thing modern spending culture is desperately trying to eliminate. Tap to pay, one-click checkout, auto-renew, buy, now pay, later. Everything is engineered to make spending feel effortless and invisible. Kakeibo deliberately brings the friction back. And the friction is the point. In my first month, my spending dropped by around 22%. Without forcing myself, without strict rules, without willpower, just awareness. By week 3, something stranger happened. I started pausing before purchases and mentally categorizing them before I even reached for my wallet. I'd literally think, do I actually want to write this down tonight? If the answer was no, I didn't buy it. That one question saved me more money than any budgeting rule I'd ever tried to follow. A YouGov survey found that 47% of Americans entered this year without any budget at all. And among those who do budget, most use apps that automate the tracking, which means they never develop the conscious spending awareness that makes real change possible. The app does the thinking. The brain stays passive, and passive brains don't change behavior. Kakeibo has survived for over 120 years, while every budgeting app gets downloaded, used for 3 weeks, and abandoned. The reason is simple. It doesn't work by organizing your data. It works by changing how you think. Habit 2, Mottainai, the cost of quiet waste. A few weeks into using Kakeibo, I opened my fridge one evening and saw a bag of spinach I'd bought earlier that week. Still sealed, still looked fine, and I immediately knew I was never going to eat it. 3 days later, I threw it away without a second thought, and that bothered me more than it should have, because it wasn't about the spinach. It was about the pattern behind it, buying things with good intentions and then quietly letting them disappear. Food, clothes, subscriptions, purchases, value evaporating through carelessness rather than necessity. That's when I came across Mottainai. There's no clean English translation. The closest meaning is, what a waste. This shouldn't have happened. But it's not just a thought, it's a feeling, a genuine discomfort when something useful is discarded or undervalued. In Japanese culture, wasting a resource, whether it's food, money, time, or an object, carries real emotional weight. It's not neutral. It's almost morally uncomfortable. Compare that to how waste functions in Western consumer culture. The USDA estimates American households waste roughly 30% of the food they buy. That's approximately $2,100 per household per year thrown directly in the bin. Americans discard around 82 pounds of clothing per person annually, according to the EPA. We replace smartphones every 2 to 3 years when they're built to last 4. We throw away furniture when we move instead of taking it with us. And none of it feels wrong, because everyone does it. I ran a simple experiment. For 1 week, I tracked everything I threw away, not what I spent, but what I wasted. I photographed everything that came out of my fridge and pantry before it hit the bin. The result genuinely shocked me. Leftover rice I forgot about, half a bag of spinach, expired yogurt, a quarter of a rotisserie chicken, bread that had gone stale. I was throwing away roughly $40 of food every single week. That's over $2,000 a year from my refrigerator alone. I made 3 changes. I started meal planning around what I already had, instead of what sounded good. I froze leftovers the same day. Instead of telling myself I'd eat them tomorrow, I bought smaller quantities more frequently instead of bulk, buying things that spoiled before I finished them. Within 3 months, my grocery spending dropped by almost 30%. Not because I was eating less, because I was wasting less. But Mottainai extends far beyond food. It changes how you see everything you own. You repair instead of replace. You use something fully before buying the next version. You stop upgrading things that still work simply because something newer exists. There's a Japanese tradition called kintsugi, broken pottery repaired with gold lacquer, so the crack becomes part of the object's beauty rather than a reason to discard it. Apply that philosophy to your finances, and the numbers become serious quickly. If the average household redirected just half their food waste, that's over $1,000 a year recovered, without earning a single dollar more. The problem was never income. It was unconscious behavior, repeated daily, for years. Habit 3, Hara-Hachi-Bu, the philosophy of enough. This one comes from Okinawa, one of the longest living populations anywhere on Earth. The practice itself is simple. Stop eating when you feel about 80% satisfied, not full, not stuffed, just satisfied. In Okinawa, it's not taught as a diet tip. It's taught as a form of respect for the food, for your body, and for your future self. You don't consume everything available to you just because it's there. Now, apply that exact philosophy to money, because most people don't stop at enough financially either. They spend until they're stretched. They schedule until they're exhausted. They upgrade until they're in debt. The concept of enough doesn't really exist, and that's catastrophic for long-term wealth. When I started applying Hara-Hachi-Bu to my finances, I made one structural change. I started living on 80% of my take-home pay. The remaining 20% moved into savings automatically, on the day my paycheck landed. Not, I'll save what's left. There was never anything left. Expenses always expand to fill available income. That's just human nature. Instead, save first, then live on the rest. The Bureau of Economic Analysis reported the U.S. personal savings rate sat around 4% in early 2025. The Japanese cultural default through habits like this targets 20%. That gap, 4% versus 20%, is the difference between retiring anxious and retiring comfortable. On a $60,000 salary, that's the difference between saving $2,400 a year and saving $12,000. Over 30 years, at 8% average returns, that gap becomes the difference between roughly $293,000 and $1.47 million. Same salary, completely different outcome. The only variable is the order. Save first, spend what remains. It felt restrictive for the first couple of months. I won't pretend it didn't. But humans adapt. That's the thing nobody tells you. Give yourself $4,000 to live on, and you'll find a way to live on $4,000. Give yourself $5,000, and you'll spend $5,000. The ceiling becomes the floor almost automatically once you stop treating it as a choice. And the thing that most people are actually chasing, relief, security, the ability to sleep without financial dread, that doesn't come from more money. It comes from margin. Margin is what lets you survive an emergency without it becoming a crisis. Margin is what lets you leave a job that's making you miserable. Margin is what lets you negotiate from a position of calm rather than desperation. Most people aren't struggling because they earn too little. They're struggling because they leave themselves no margin at all. Habit 4. Kaizen. Stop trying to change everything at once. Here's the pattern I see constantly. Someone has a bad month financially. They feel the guilt. They make the decision. New budget, no eating out, no shopping. Cancel everything. Save 40% starting Monday. And for about 2 weeks, it works. Then life happens. A stressful day at work, a friend's birthday dinner, 1 weak moment in a shop, and suddenly the whole system collapses because missing one day feels like failing entirely. Then they go back to exactly how things were before. Sometimes worse because the guilt makes them avoid thinking about money altogether. That's not a discipline problem. That's a design problem. The approach was never going to work, not because the person was weak, but because the human brain physically resists large, sudden change. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes threat, activates when you attempt dramatic lifestyle shifts. Big changes feel dangerous. The brain treats them like threats and eventually overrides your willpower to protect you from them. That's why almost every dramatic financial overhaul fails by month 2. Kaizen solves this completely differently. The principle comes from Japanese manufacturing philosophy. Toyota made it famous. But in Japanese daily life, it applies to everything. The idea is devastatingly simple. Instead of massive change, you improve by 1% repeatedly over a long period of time. Applied to money, it looks like this. Month 1, you reduce your food delivery spending by 10%, not 80%, 10%. So easy, it almost feels pointless. Month 2, you increase your savings contribution by 1%. Month 3, you cancel one subscription you haven't used in 60 days. Month 4, you cook one additional meal at home per week. Each change is so small, your brain doesn't register it as a threat. There's no resistance, no willpower battle, no white-knuckling through a restrictive budget. But here's what happens after 12 months of this. Your dining out spending is down 30%, Your savings rate climbed from 4% to 16%. You've eliminated $180 a month in subscriptions you didn't notice you weren't using. Your grocery habits completely shifted, and you genuinely cannot pinpoint the moment any of it changed. It just quietly became your normal. That's the secret. Small changes don't feel like sacrifice. They feel like nothing. And then one day you look up, and your entire financial life is different. I made one Kaizen change in month 1 of this process. No food delivery on weekdays. That single rule saved me $280 in the first month. Not because delivery is evil, but because my delivery habit was completely automatic. I wasn't choosing it consciously. I was just doing it because I'd always done it. Kaizen interrupts automation. It replaces unconscious habits with intentional ones, so slowly that your brain never fights back. Stack 12 of those tiny changes across a year, and you don't recognize your old financial life anymore. Habit 5. Ikigai. Give your money an actual purpose. Most financial advice tells you how to save money. Almost none of it asks why. And that missing question is why most people with good budgets still feel vaguely empty about money. They're hitting their numbers, but they don't know what the numbers are for. So the discipline eventually collapses because discipline without direction always does. Ikigai is usually translated as reason for being. In the West, it's been turned into a career framework. Find the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. But in Japan, Ikigai isn't about career optimization. It's simpler and more personal than that. It's just the thing that gives your daily life structure and meaning. Applied to money, it becomes one question. What is all of this actually for? Not, how do I save more? But why are you saving at all? What specific life are you building? What does financial stability actually look like for you? Not in general, but in your actual day-to-day existence? Because without that answer, money is either something you anxiously hoard or something you emotionally spend. There's no direction underneath the behavior. I have a friend, Marcus, who makes around $58,000 a year in a mid-level admin role. He wasn't particularly disciplined, he wasn't interested in budgets, but when he sat down and defined his Ikigai, he said, I want to be financially stable enough to never have to miss time with my kids because of money stress. Everything changed, not because he suddenly became disciplined, because random purchases stopped making sense. He didn't need willpower to skip impulse buys, he needed purpose. And once he had it, the impulse buys didn't just feel expensive, they felt irrelevant. They had nothing to do with the life he was actually trying to build. That's what purpose does that spreadsheets can't. It makes the right decisions obvious and makes the wrong ones feel pointless rather than tempting. Take 20 minutes. Write down what financial security actually means for your specific life. Not a number, a reality. What does your day look like? What choices do you have? What stress is gone? Then look at your last 3 months of spending and ask honestly, does this reflect the life I just described? For most people, the answer is no. And that gap between the life you're spending toward and the life you actually want, that's where financial clarity begins. Habit 6. Usuji, the annual reset that finds hidden money. In Japan, usuji is a tradition performed at the end of each year. Families conduct a thorough clean of the entire home, not just tidying, but a deliberate ritual of letting go, discarding what no longer serves you, entering the new year with clarity. Applied to finances, usuji becomes one of the most practically powerful habits on this entire list. Once a year, I do it every December, you sit down and conduct a complete audit of your financial life. Not a glance, a full review. Every subscription, every recurring charge, every insurance policy, every auto pay, every investment allocation, every debt balance. You look at all of it without autopilot. The reason this matters is that financial systems drift. You set something up 2 years ago and forget about it. A free trial converts to a paid plan. A gym membership you haven't used since February keeps quietly billing you. An insurance premium creeps up 8% and you never notice because you're not looking. In my first Utsuji, I found $318 a month in charges I had either completely forgotten about or no longer needed. $318 every month, quietly leaving my account while I wasn't paying attention. That's $3,816 a year recovered from one afternoon of focused review. Specific things to check during your annual reset: subscriptions, streaming, apps, software, memberships. If you haven't used it in 60 days, cancel it. You can always resubscribe if you miss it. Most people don't. Insurance, car, home, renters, life. Ring your provider and ask if your current rate is still competitive. Most will negotiate rather than lose you. If they won't, switch. Most people save between $200 and $600 a year just by making this call. Utility bills, energy suppliers, broadband, mobile plans. Switching providers or negotiating takes 30 minutes and routinely saves $300 to $500 annually in the UK and US both. Debt balances. Know exactly what you owe, at what interest rates, in what order you're tackling them. Vague awareness of debt is one of the most expensive habits a person can have. Investment allocations. If you have a pension, 401k, or ISA, check that your allocation still reflects your goals and timeline. Most people set this once and never look again. The whole process takes maybe 2 to 3 hours, once a year. The financial return on those 2 hours is almost always measured in thousands. Habit 7. Chokin, save first. Non-negotiable. Chokin literally means savings in Japanese. But in Japanese financial culture, it represents a specific behavioral habit. Not just saving, but saving first. The moment money enters your account, a portion of it leaves immediately into a savings or investment account. Spending happens with whatever remains, not the other way around. This sounds simple. It isn't. It's actually the single most structurally important financial habit in this entire list. Because of something called Parkinson's Law, originally about time, but completely true about money too, expenses expand to fill available income. Give yourself $5,000 to spend, and you will find a way to spend $5,000. It's not weakness, it's human nature. Chokin breaks this law by reducing your available spending income before you ever see it. Let me show you what this looks like in real numbers. 2 people both earn $4,800 a month after tax. Same city, same cost of living. Person A does what most people do. Earns, spends throughout the month, saves whatever's left. In practice, nothing's left. Spending fills the space. Savings rate, roughly 3%, about $145 a month. Person B implements Chokin. On the morning after payday, an automatic transfer moves $960, 20%, into a combination of a high-yield savings account and retirement investment. They live on $3,840. They adjust within about 8 weeks because the option to spend the full amount doesn't exist. After 1 year, Person A has saved approximately $1,740. Person B has saved and invested $11,520. Over 20 years at 8% average returns. Person A has roughly $100,000. Person B has approximately $570,000. Same salary, same city, same life. The only difference is sequence. Save first, spend second, versus spend first, save never. The Vanguard 2024 How America Saves report found that automatic enrollment and auto-escalation features in 401k plans were the single biggest driver of improved savings rates. The people saving the most aren't more disciplined. They're more automated. They implemented Chokin without knowing the name. Set up an automatic transfer on the day after your paycheck lands, even if it's 5% to start, even if that feels small, because the habit of saving before spending is worth more than the amount, and you build both over time. Habit 8. Shinrin-yoku and free living. Disconnect enjoyment from spending. Shinrin-yoku means forest bathing, the Japanese practice of spending quiet, contemplative time in nature as a form of mental restoration and stress reduction. It costs nothing. And the broader principle it represents is something I've come to think of as free living, the deliberate decision to build your leisure, your social life, and your rest around activities that don't require a transaction. In the US and UK, this sounds almost radical because leisure and spending have become almost completely synonymous. A night out costs money. A weekend costs money. Relaxing costs money. Even boredom costs money. We fill it with shopping, delivery, subscriptions, entertainment. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports the average American household spends approximately $3,200 a year on entertainment. The UK equivalent is similarly significant. Japanese culture offers a genuinely different model. Walking, cooking together, reading, gardening, visiting parks, long baths, tea at home. The most restorative moments of daily life happen without a transaction. When I started deliberately building my weekends around free activities, parks, cooking with friends at home, long walks, the local library, my entertainment spending dropped by over 60% in 3 months. But here's the thing I didn't expect. The quality of my weekends improved. Not because I was forcing myself to enjoy cheaper things, but because I stopped treating entertainment as something that required purchasing. I stopped consuming my way through weekends and started actually experiencing them. The average person underestimates their impulse and entertainment spending by nearly $300 a month, according to behavioral finance research. That's not because they're dishonest. It's because small transactional enjoyments have become completely invisible. Making leisure intentional, rather than automatic and commercial, is one of the most underrated financial habits available. And unlike most financial advice, it doesn't feel like sacrifice. It actually feels like getting your time back. Habit 9. Hansei, the 10-minute monthly habit that holds everything together. This is the last habit, and it's the one that makes all the others compound. Hansei is the Japanese practice of sincere self-reflection. Not guilt, not punishment, not dramatic promises to do better. Just honest examination. What happened, what worked, what didn't, and what you'll adjust. In Japanese schools, children practice Hansei regularly. It's embedded in the culture as a basic mechanism of growth. You don't reflect because you failed. You reflect because reflection is how humans improve. Applied to finances. At the end of every month, you sit down for 10 minutes with your notebook and you ask yourself 3 questions. Did I meet my savings goal this month? What purchases genuinely improved my life? What would I do differently next month? No shame attached to the answers. No drama, just honesty. That's it. 10 minutes, once a month. And I know how small that sounds. But here's what it actually does over time. Without reflection, most people repeat the same financial mistakes for years on autopilot. Spend, feel mild stress, forget about it, spend again. The cycle continues because it's never examined. Nothing changes because nothing is required to change. Hansei interrupts that cycle. I remember one particular monthly review where I noticed I'd spent nearly $480 eating out alone. Not dinners with friends, not meaningful experiences, just convenience meals on tired evenings because I hadn't planned ahead. That realization wasn't emotional. It was clarifying. I wasn't overspending because I loved restaurants. I was overspending because I was exhausted and unprepared. Those are completely different problems with completely different solutions. Instead of trying to become more disciplined about eating out, I started meal prepping twice a week. Problem solved at the root instead of managed at the symptom. That's what 10 minutes of honest reflection buys you. Solutions to real problems rather than willpower applied to surface ones. The thing nobody tells you about building wealth. None of these habits are extreme. None of them require a higher income. None of them require you to become a different kind of person. None of them went viral on TikTok. A notebook, saving first, tracking waste, tiny improvements, monthly reflection, boring, simple, almost embarrassingly ordinary. But together, stacked on top of each other, practiced month after month, they produce something that no income level can produce on its own. They produce a relationship with money that's grounded, intentional, and sustainable. The wealthiest people I've studied, not the flashiest, not the highest earners, but the ones with the deepest financial security and the least financial anxiety, share one trait. They understand money at a fundamental level. Not complicated investment strategies, just the basics, practiced consistently for a long time. Compound interest gets talked about constantly in finance, but compounding applies to habits too. Awareness compounds, discipline compounds, intentional living compounds, and the quiet, boring, deeply effective thing about these Japanese habits is that they all operate on the same principle. Small, consistent inputs, repeated over time, producing results wildly disproportionate to the effort involved. The woman sitting at her kitchen table 2 years ago, surrounded by things she didn't need, bought with money she didn't have. She didn't need a higher salary. She needed a different philosophy. The salary was always enough. The system underneath it wasn't. Japan figured this out a long time ago. These principles survived world wars, economic collapses, and complete cultural transformation because they're not built on tactics. They're built on something deeper. Respect for money as a resource. respect for yourself as the person responsible for it, and the quiet understanding that wealth isn't built loudly. It's built the same way a Japanese garden grows, slowly, intentionally, with nothing wasted and nothing rushed. You don't need to earn more to start. You need a notebook, a pen, and the decision to finally pay attention. That's where it starts. That's where it always starts.